6 months ago, if someone told me I'd be sitting in my beautiful beach house, legally protected and surrounded by people who truly love me, I would have laughed through my tears. Because 6 months ago, I was Helen Johnson, a 69-year-old widow who thought her own son was about to steal everything I'd worked 40 years to build. It all started on what should have been a perfect Tuesday morning. I was out in my little garden, tending to the tomatoes I'd planted behind my beach house in Myrtle Beach. At my age, you'd think I'd slow down, but these hands have been working since I was 16, and they don't know how to stop. The morning sun was just right, the ocean breeze was gentle, and I was thinking about my late husband Frank, who used to say this little piece of heaven was proof that hard work pays off. That's when my phone rang. Mom. Derek's voice was different. Not the usual tone when he needed money. This was colder, more businesslike. I need to talk to you about the house. Well, good morning to you too, son, I said, brushing dirt off my hands. What about the house? We sold it, Mom. The beach house. Brittany found a buyer, and we're closing next week. We need you packed and out by Friday. I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, but because surely I'd misheard. Derek, honey, what are you talking about? You can't sell my house. Mom, we've discussed this. You're getting older. Living alone by the ocean isn't safe anymore. Brittany and I have been handling your affairs, and this buyer made an offer we couldn't refuse. $200,000, cash. $200,000? I paid $350 for this place just 5 years ago, but that wasn't the part that made my blood run cold. Derek Allen Johnson, I said, using his full name like when he was 7 years old and tracking mud through the house. You listen to me very carefully. I have never, not once, asked you to handle my affairs, and I sure as hell never gave you permission to sell anything of mine. Mom, please don't make this harder than it needs to be. The papers are already signed. We're trying to help you. That money will pay for a nice assisted living place, and you won't have to worry about anything anymore. Assisted living. The words hit me like a slap. I'd raised this boy by myself after his father died when Derek was 12. I'd worked double shifts at the textile factory to keep him in decent clothes and college-bound. I'd gone without so he could have. And now he was talking about putting me away like some broken piece of furniture. Derek, I need you to explain something to me real slow, I said, my voice getting that edge that used to make him straighten up. How exactly did you sign papers to sell a house that isn't yours? There was a pause. Then Brittany's voice in the background, whispering something I couldn't quite catch. Mom, you're not understanding. We have power of attorney. We're doing what's best for you. The moving truck will be there Friday morning to help you pack. Power of attorney? I'd never signed any such thing. I hung up that phone and stood there in my garden, tomato plants swaying in the breeze, trying to make sense of what just happened. But something Frank used to say kept echoing in my mind. Helen, if something sounds too wrong to be true, it probably is. And if someone's trying to rush you, they're probably trying to fool you. I walked around to the front of my house that I'd saved 20 years to buy. And that's when I saw them. Real estate signs. 2 of them, planted right there in my front yard like they belonged there. One said, sold in big red letters. The other one made my knees weak. It said, under contract, quick closing. As I stood there staring at those signs, I realized Derek wasn't just trying to help his confused old mother. He was stealing from me. And tomorrow, I was going to find out exactly how deep this betrayal went. Because Helen Johnson didn't raise a quitter, and she sure didn't raise a thief. It was time to remind Derek exactly which one of us he was dealing with. That night, I didn't sleep a wink. I kept thinking about Derek's voice on the phone, so cold, so sure of himself. Like he'd already decided I was just some confused old lady who didn't know what was best for her. Well, this confused old lady was about to do something that would surprise him. The next morning, I marched myself right down to Palmetto Realty, the office whose sign was planted in my yard. The young woman at the front desk looked up when I walked in, probably thinking I was some grandmother looking to downsize. I'm Helen Johnson, I said, and I understand you folks think you're selling my house at 247 Ocean View Drive. Her face lit up. Oh yes, Mrs. Johnson, we're so excited about this transaction. Your son Derek has been wonderful to work with. Just a few more signatures needed from you, and we'll be ready for closing Friday. A few more signatures. From me. Honey, I said, trying to keep my voice level. Could you show me exactly what papers you have with my name on them? She pulled out a thick folder and spread the documents across the desk. And there it was, my signature on paper after paper. Sale agreement, disclosures, transfer documents, Helen M. Johnson, signed in blue ink on every line that mattered. But here's the thing about working 40 years in quality control at a textile factory. You learn to spot things that don't look right. And something about those signatures was very, very wrong. "Miss," I said to the young woman, "do you have a magnifying glass?" She looked confused, but handed me one. I studied those signatures under the glass, and my heart started pounding. The H in Helen was wrong. I've signed my name probably 50,000 times in my life, and I always make my H with a little loop at the top. These H's were straight lines. "Sweetheart," I said, handing back the magnifying glass, "I need you to call your broker right now because somebody's committed a serious crime here." "Ma'am, I don't understand. These aren't my signatures. Someone forged every single one of them." The color drained from her face. She called her broker, who came out looking like he'd swallowed a lemon. Within an hour, I was at the police station filing a fraud report, and by afternoon, the investigation was officially started. But Derek wasn't done with his surprises. When I got home that afternoon, I found an envelope slipped under my door. Inside was a bank statement, my bank statement, showing withdrawals I'd never made. 5,000 here, 3,000 there, all adding up to nearly $20,000 taken from my savings over the past 6 months. All the withdrawals were signed by me, except they weren't. I called my bank immediately. "Mrs. Johnson," the manager said, "your son Derek has been handling many of your transactions lately. He has your power of attorney on file." "Sir, I have never, not ever, given my son power of attorney over anything. I'd like to see that document." An hour later, I was sitting in the bank manager's office looking at a power of attorney form with my signature on it. A signature that looked about as much like my real one as a cat looks like a goldfish. "This is fraud," I told the manager. "I'm filing charges." "Mrs. Johnson, are you sure? This is your son we're talking about." "That's exactly why I'm sure," I said. As I drove home that evening, my phone rang. Derek again. "Mom, I heard you went to the police today. What's gotten into you?" "What's gotten into me, Derek, is the realization that my own son is a criminal." "Mom, you're confused. You signed all those papers. Maybe you just don't remember." "Son, I may be 69 years old, but there's nothing wrong with my memory, and I remember very clearly never signing a damn thing that would let you steal from me." "We're not stealing, Mom. We're helping you. You can't live alone anymore." "Derek, let me make something real clear to you. I've been living alone just fine for 7 years since your father died. I've been managing my own money just fine for 69 years, and I'll be damned if I'm going to stop now because you and that wife of yours got greedy." "Mom, the buyers are coming tomorrow to see the house. Don't embarrass us." And that's when it hit me. Derek wasn't just stealing my house. He was planning to parade strangers through it like I was already gone, like I was already dead. "Derek," I said, "you bring those buyers by my house, and I'll show them exactly what kind of man you really are." I hung up and sat in my kitchen, looking out at the ocean that Frank and I had dreamed of seeing from our own window. Tomorrow, Derek was going to learn something important about his mother. I didn't get this far in life by backing down from bullies, even when the bully was my own son. Thursday morning came way too early. I'd spent the night going through Frank's old papers, looking for anything that might help me understand how Derek thought he could just take my house. That's when I found something that made me stop cold. A business card for Robert Hutchinson, attorney at law, Frank's lawyer. The name rang a bell, but before I could think about it more, I heard car doors slamming in my driveway. 3 cars. Derek's BMW, a car I didn't recognize, and a white real estate van. I looked out my front window and saw Derek walking up my front steps with Brittany and 3 strangers in business suits. His face had that look I remembered from when he was a teenager trying to get away with something. Confident on the surface, but worried underneath. The doorbell rang. I opened it wearing my oldest house dress and my husband's work boots, holding a cup of coffee like it was any other morning. "Mom," Derek said, trying to smile, "these are the buyers I told you about. Mr. and Mrs. Davidson, and their real estate agent, Mrs. Chen." The Davidsons looked like nice people, probably in their 50s, excited about their beach house purchase. Mrs. Chen looked professional and a little nervous. "Folks," I said pleasantly, "I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. This house isn't for sale." Derek's face went red. "Mom, we talked about this. These people have driven 3 hours to see the house." "Well, Derek, that's unfortunate, because nobody asked me if they could see my house." Mrs. Chen stepped forward. "Mrs. Johnson, I'm sorry for the confusion. We have all the paperwork here showing the sale agreement." "Honey," I said to her, "did you know that every signature on those papers is forged? I filed a police report yesterday. Y'all might want to call your legal department before you go any further with this." Mr. Davidson looked confused. "I'm sorry, what's happening here?" "What's happening," I said, "is that my son forged my signature on legal documents and tried to sell my house without my knowledge or permission. That's called fraud where I come from." Derek grabbed my arm. "Mom, you're embarrassing yourself. These people came here in good faith." I pulled my arm away. "Derek Allen Johnson, don't you dare put your hands on me in my own house." Brittany finally spoke up. "Helen, you're obviously having some memory issues. Derek's just trying to help you transition to a more appropriate living situation." "Memory issues?" I laughed. "Honey, my memory's just fine. I remember working 2 jobs to put Derek through college. I remember going without so he could have nice things. And I remember very clearly never signing anything that would let him steal from me." "We're not stealing," Derek shouted. "You can't live here alone anymore. You're going to hurt yourself, or forget to pay bills, or what, Derek? Or I might enjoy the house I worked 20 years to afford, or I might not hand over my life savings to my son and his spending happy wife." The Davidsons started backing toward their car. Mrs. Chen was frantically making phone calls. "Look what you've done," Brittany hissed. "You've ruined everything." "Good," I said, "because there was nothing to ruin except your little scheme." Derek's voice got low and mean. "Mom, you can either cooperate with us or we'll have you declared incompetent. We already have documentation of your declining mental state." That's when something inside me snapped. Not anger, something colder and more dangerous. "Derek," I said quietly, "you just made the biggest mistake of your life." "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means you've forgotten something important about your mother. I didn't survive 40 years in a man's world by being weak. I didn't raise you by myself by being stupid. And I sure didn't buy this house by being someone you could push around." I walked to my kitchen drawer and pulled out the business card I'd found. "It means I'm calling Frank's lawyer, and we're going to have a real interesting conversation about what your father actually put in place to protect this house." Derek's face went pale. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the fact that Frank was a lot smarter than either of us gave him credit for. And tomorrow, you're going to find out exactly how smart." The buyers had already left. Mrs. Chen was packing up her papers. Brittany was screaming at Derek about their vacation plans and how I'd ruined everything. But all I could hear was Frank's voice in my memory, saying something he'd told me right before he died. "Helen, I made sure you'd always be protected, even from family who might not have your best interests at heart." At the time, I thought he was just talking. But sitting there watching Derek storm off my property, I realized my husband had been planning for exactly this moment. And tomorrow, Derek was going to learn what it meant to try to steal from Helen Johnson. That night, I sat on my little back deck listening to the waves and thinking about where I went wrong with Derek. Because somewhere between the boy who used to help me plant tomatoes and the man who tried to steal my house, something had gone terribly wrong. I remembered the day Frank and I first saw this house. Derek was already grown and married to Brittany by then, living in Charlotte with his fancy corporate job. The house was a foreclosure. Some family had lost everything in the recession, and here Frank and I were, finally able to afford our dream because of someone else's nightmare. "Helen," Frank had said, standing on this same deck, "we earned this. 20 years of double shifts, 20 years of going without, 20 years of saving every penny we could. Don't you feel guilty for 1 second?" Frank was right. We'd earned it. Every square foot of this house represented sacrifice. While Derek was in high school, I was working at the textile factory during the day and cleaning offices at night. While other families went on vacations, we put every extra dollar in the beach house fund. While Derek's friends got new cars for graduation, Derek got my old Honda and a promise that someday, when he had kids, they'd have a grandfather's beach house to visit. But Derek never brought his kids here. Not once in the 5 years since we bought it. "Mom," he'd say when I invited them for holidays, "the kids are too busy with sports, maybe next time." Or, "Brittany doesn't really like the beach." Or, "It's too far to drive for just a weekend." What he really meant was that he was embarrassed. Embarrassed by his mother who worked in a factory. Embarrassed by his father who drove a delivery truck. Embarrassed by parents who lived in a little beach house instead of a suburban mansion. I'd seen it in his eyes the first time he brought Brittany to meet us. She'd walked through our old double-wide in town, looking at everything like it might contaminate her designer purse. She'd made polite conversation, but I saw her texting during dinner, probably telling her friends about Derek's quaint family. After they left that night, Frank had shaken his head. "That girl's trouble, Helen. She's filling his head with ideas about being better than where he came from. Frank, maybe we're just old-fashioned. Maybe Derek wants different things than we did. Wanting different things is fine. Being ashamed of your family isn't." Frank was right, as usual. Over the years, Derek's visits got shorter and further apart. His calls became requests for money. Always emergencies, always urgent. The business was struggling, or the kids needed something for school, or Brittany's car needed repairs. And fool that I was, I helped. I sent money I could barely afford because I thought that's what mothers do. I thought if I just showed enough love, enough support, Derek would remember who raised him. Instead, he saw my generosity as weakness. He saw my love as stupidity. The next morning, I called Robert Hutchinson's office. His secretary said he could see me that afternoon, which surprised me. Lawyers usually make you wait weeks. "Mrs. Johnson," she said, "Mr. Hutchinson has been expecting your call for quite some time." Expecting my call? What did that mean? I spent the morning going through every document Frank had left me. Most of it was standard stuff. Insurance policies, his will, the deed to our old house in town. But at the very bottom of the box, I found something I'd never seen before. A thick envelope with my name on it in Frank's handwriting. Inside was a letter dated just 3 months before he died. "Helen, if you're reading this, it means someone's trying to take advantage of you, probably Derek. I hope I'm wrong, but I've seen how Brittany looks at money, and I've seen how Derek started looking at our things like they're already his. I've taken care of this house, Helen. You'll understand when you talk to Bob Hutchinson. Don't let anyone make you feel weak or confused. You're the strongest woman I've ever known, and you raised a son who should know better. If he's forgotten, remind him. Love, Frank." I sat there holding that letter, and for the first time since this whole mess started, I smiled. Really smiled. Frank had seen this coming. My husband, who never said much but noticed everything, had been watching Derek turn into someone we didn't recognize. And he'd done something about it. As I got ready to drive to the lawyer's office, my phone rang. Derek again. "Mom, Brittany's really upset about yesterday. You embarrassed us in front of important people." "Derek, those people weren't important to me. My house is important to me. My dignity is important to me. You used to be important to me." What's that supposed to mean? It means I raised a boy who knew the value of hard work and honesty. But that boy grew up into a man I don't recognize. "Mom, we're trying to help you." "No, Derek, you're trying to help yourselves. There's a difference." I hung up and headed to town, Frank's letter in my purse. Derek thought he was dealing with a confused old woman who didn't understand the world anymore. He was about to learn that he'd forgotten the most important lesson his mother ever taught him. Helen Johnson doesn't back down from a fight, especially when someone's trying to steal from her family. Even when that someone is family. I should have seen it coming. When I got back from the lawyer's office that afternoon, and what a revelation that had been, Derek's BMW was in my driveway again. But this time he wasn't alone. A locksmith's van was parked right behind him. I sat in my old Honda for a moment, watching through the windshield as Derek directed the locksmith to my front door. My front door. On my house. That he was changing the locks on. The lawyer's meeting had been everything Frank's letter promised and more. But sitting there watching my son treat my home like it was already his, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not anger. Anger is hot and quick. This was cold and patient and dangerous. I got out of my car and walked up to Derek. Interesting time for home maintenance, don't you think? Derek didn't even look embarrassed. Mom, we talked about this. You're not safe here alone. Brittany found you a lovely assisted living facility in Charlotte. We can visit every weekend. Derek, I want you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to say. I am not leaving my house. I am not going to any facility, and you are not changing my locks. Mom, the decision's already made. The locksmith will be done in an hour, and then we'll help you pack. That's when I noticed the moving truck parked down the street. They hadn't just planned to lock me out, they'd planned to take my things too. Sir, I said to the locksmith, I'm Helen Johnson, and this is my house. I did not authorize this work. The locksmith looked confused. Ma'am, this gentleman has the work order and said he had permission. He doesn't. This is my property, and I'm asking you to stop. Derek stepped between us. Mom, don't make this harder than it has to be. You're not thinking clearly. I'm thinking clearly enough to know that what you're doing is called breaking and entering. It's a felony in South Carolina. Derek's face got that mean look again. Mom, we have power of attorney. We have every right to secure this property. Derek, show me that power of attorney. We filed it with the real estate agent. Show me a copy. I don't have it with me. Then you have no authority to change anything on my property. The locksmith packed up his tools. I'm not getting in the middle of a family dispute. Y'all figure this out and call me back. After he left, Derek and I stood in my driveway, staring at each other like two gunfighters in an old western. Mom, you can either come with us willingly, or we'll have you declared incompetent and committed. We already have statements from doctors about your declining mental state. What doctors, Derek? I haven't seen a doctor except for my regular checkup in over a year. Brittany has documentation. Brittany has documentation about my mental state? From what doctors? Derek couldn't answer because there was no answer. They'd been planning to have me declared incompetent based on lies. Get off my property, Derek, now. Fine. But this isn't over. We'll be back tomorrow with the proper paperwork, and then you'll see. After they left, I tried my key in the front door. It still worked. The locksmith hadn't finished the job. But as I stood in my kitchen, I realized something chilling. They'd been in my house, going through my things, planning my life like I was already dead. That night, around 11 p.m., I heard cars in my driveway again. Derek and Brittany, plus two men I didn't recognize. I watched from my bedroom window as they tried their own keys in my front door. When those didn't work, one of the men started working on the lock with some kind of tool. I called 911. Ma'am, what's your emergency? Someone's breaking into my house. Are you inside the residence? Yes, and I can see them trying to break down my front door. We'll have officers there in 10 minutes. Derek and his friends were gone before the police arrived, but they'd succeeded in jamming my front door lock. The officer was sympathetic, but said without catching them in the act, there wasn't much he could do. Ma'am, is there somewhere else you can stay tonight? A friend or family member? I almost laughed. My family member was the one trying to break in. Officer, I'm not leaving my house. I understand. But if they come back, I'll call you again. But they did come back. Around 3 a.m., I heard them again. This time, they went around to the back door. When I called 911 again, the dispatcher told me the earliest a unit could respond was 30 minutes. They had a major accident on Highway 17. 30 minutes was plenty of time for Derek to get inside. So I did something I never thought I'd do in my life. I grabbed my purse, my important papers, and the quilt Frank's mother made for our wedding, and I went out to my car. I sat in my Honda in the parking lot of a 24-hour diner, trying to figure out how my life had gotten to this point. At 69 years old, I was sleeping in my car because my own son was trying to steal my house. But as I sat there, listening to the ocean a few blocks away, I thought about what Robert Hutchinson had told me that afternoon. Frank hadn't just left me this house. He'd protected it in ways Derek couldn't even imagine. And tomorrow, Derek was going to learn what his father really thought of sons who steal from their mothers. I pulled Frank's letter out of my purse and read it again by the dome light. Don't let anyone make you feel weak or confused. You're the strongest woman I've ever known. Frank was right. I was strong. Strong enough to survive 40 years in a textile factory. Strong enough to raise Derek by myself after Frank died the first time, when Derek was 12. Strong enough to save every penny for 20 years to buy this house, and strong enough to protect it from anyone who tried to take it, even my own son. As the sun came up over the Atlantic, I made a decision. Derek thought he was dealing with a weak old woman. Tomorrow he was going to meet the woman who'd survived everything life threw at her, and he was going to learn why that woman never backed down from a fight. The next morning, I sat in Robert Hutchinson's office, looking like exactly what I was, a woman who'd spent the night in her car. My hair was a mess, my clothes were wrinkled, and I probably smelled like the McDonald's coffee I'd bought at 6 a.m. But Robert Hutchinson looked at me like I was the most important client he'd ever had. "Mrs. Johnson," he said, "Frank told me this day might come. I hoped it wouldn't. But Frank knew Derek better than Derek knew himself. Mr. Hutchinson was probably 70 himself, with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. His office was full of law books and family photos, and he had the calm presence of a man who'd seen everything and wasn't surprised by anything anymore. "Mr. Hutchinson, I need to understand what Frank did. His letter said you'd explain." He opened a thick file folder. "Helen, may I call you Helen? Your husband was one of the smartest men I ever met when it came to protecting his family. 3 months before he died, he came to me with a concern." "What kind of concern?" "He said Derek had been asking too many questions about your finances, about the value of the beach house, about your life insurance policies, about what would happen to everything when you died. Frank was worried." I felt my heart sink. Derek was planning this even before Frank died? I don't know if he was planning anything specific, but Frank could see the way Derek looked at your assets like they were already his inheritance. So Frank did something very smart. Mr. Hutchinson pulled out a document I'd never seen before. "Helen, your beach house isn't owned by you. It's owned by the Frank and Helen Johnson Family Trust." "What does that mean?" "It means Derek can't sell it, can't mortgage it, can't touch it. You're the sole trustee as long as you're alive and competent. But here's the beautiful part. Frank named me as the backup trustee, specifically to protect the trust from family members acting against Helen's interests." I stared at the document. "So when Derek forged my signature, he committed fraud against a legal trust. That's not just a misdemeanor, Helen. That's a federal crime." Mr. Hutchinson pulled out more papers. "But that's not all Frank did. He also created what's called a spend-thrift clause. Even if Derek somehow got control of the trust, he couldn't access the money. It would be paid out in small monthly amounts over 20 years. Frank really thought Derek would steal from me? Frank loved Derek, but he wasn't blind to Derek's character, especially after Brittany came into the picture. Frank saw how she looked at your house, your savings, your things. He saw Derek starting to think of himself as entitled to your money. I thought about all the times Derek had asked for loans over the years, all the emergencies that never seemed to end, all the ways he'd made me feel guilty for having anything when he needed something. "Mr. Hutchinson, Derek said he has power of attorney over my affairs." Mr. Hutchinson smiled, actually smiled. "Helen, show me that document." I pulled out the papers Derek had used with the bank. Mr. Hutchinson looked at them for about 30 seconds before he started laughing. "Helen, this isn't even a good forgery. Look at this signature. Look at the date. This is supposedly from 2019, but Derek signed it in the wrong place. That signature line wasn't added to our standard form until 2021. What does that mean? It means Derek is not just a thief. He's a sloppy thief. We can prove these documents are fake in about 5 minutes." Mr. Hutchinson reached for his phone. "Helen, with your permission, I'd like to call the police detective handling your fraud case. I think he's going to be very interested in what we found." 20 minutes later, Detective Martinez was sitting in Mr. Hutchinson's office, looking at the forged documents Derek had used. "Mrs. Johnson," Detective Martinez said, "your son has committed at least 4 felonies that I can see right now: forgery, fraud, attempted theft, and conspiracy. If he's taken any money from your accounts, add grand larceny to the list." "Detective, what happens now?" "Now we build a case. But Mrs. Johnson, I have to ask, are you sure you want to prosecute your own son?" I thought about sleeping in my car. I thought about Derek trying to break into my house. I thought about him telling strangers I was mentally incompetent. I thought about 40 years of hard work that he'd tried to steal in a single phone call. "Detective, Derek stopped being my son the moment he decided to treat me like a mark instead of his mother. Yes, I want to prosecute. Mr. Hutchinson leaned forward. Detective, there's something else. Mrs. Johnson spent last night in her car because Derek and his associates tried to break into her house. Multiple times. We'll add breaking and entering, and if he comes back, we'll add harassment and intimidation. After Detective Martinez left, Mr. Hutchinson and I sat in his office making plans. Real plans. Not Derek's plans to steal from me, but my plans to protect myself and make sure this never happened again. Helen, Mr. Hutchinson said, Frank left you with more protection than you realize. The trust is ironclad. Your financial accounts are protected. And now we have evidence of Derek's crimes. Mr. Hutchinson, what would Frank think about all this? Frank loved Derek, but he loved you more, and he'd be proud of you for fighting back. As I left Mr. Hutchinson's office that afternoon, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Not just relief, power. Frank had given me everything I needed to protect myself. He'd seen this coming and made sure I'd never be helpless. Derek thought he was stealing from a confused old woman. Tomorrow, he was going to learn he'd been stealing from a legally protected trust with a paper trail that would put him in prison, and that the confused old woman was actually a lot smarter than he'd ever given her credit for. Over the next 3 days, I learned more about legal strategy than I'd learned in 69 years of living. Mr. Hutchinson introduced me to Detective Martinez's partner, Detective Sarah Chen, who specialized in family financial crimes. Apparently, what Derek was doing to me wasn't unique. It happened to elderly people all over the country, often by their own children. Mrs. Johnson, Detective Chen said, your case is actually unusual because you caught it so early and because your husband protected you so well. Most victims don't realize they're being robbed until everything's gone. We were sitting in Mr. Hutchinson's conference room, surrounded by documents, bank records, and evidence bags. In 3 days, we'd built a case that would make Derek very famous, in all the wrong ways. Detective, what exactly can we prove? Detective Chen opened her file. Forgery of your signature on at least 12 documents, fraud in attempting to sell property he doesn't own, theft of nearly $23,000 from your accounts, attempted identity theft, and conspiracy because Brittany was in on all of it. Brittany too? Mrs. Johnson. Some of these withdrawals from your account were made with a card in Brittany's name. She signed documents claiming to be your power of attorney. She's looking at the same charges Derek is. Mr. Hutchinson spread out copies of the bank surveillance photos on the table. There was Brittany, clear as day, using a debit card with my name on it at an ATM in Charlotte. There was Derek, signing my name at the bank to access my safe deposit box. Mr. Hutchinson, they went into my safe deposit box? They did. Took your grandmother's jewelry, some bonds, and the cash you kept for emergencies. About $15,000 worth. I felt that cold anger again. My grandmother's jewelry, the wedding ring from my first marriage before Derek's father died, the pearl necklace Frank had saved up to buy me for our anniversary. Where are my things now? Detective Chen looked uncomfortable. Some of the jewelry was pawned. We're working on getting it back. Some of the bonds were cashed. The cash, she shrugged. Derek and Brittany had stolen my grandmother's jewelry to pay for their lifestyle. They'd taken the emergency money I'd saved in case something happened to me. They'd treated my life savings like their personal checking account. Mrs. Johnson, Mr. Hutchinson said gently, there's something else you need to know. We've been investigating Derek's finances, and he's in serious debt. Credit cards, a second mortgage, car loans. They needed your money to avoid bankruptcy. So they decided to steal it. They probably told themselves they were just taking their inheritance early. People convince themselves of amazing things when they want something badly enough. Detective Martinez came in with fresh coffee and a grim expression. Mrs. Johnson, Derek just called the bank again, trying to access your accounts. When they told him the accounts were frozen pending investigation, he got vocal. What do you mean? He told them his crazy mother was making false accusations and that he was going to have you committed by the end of the week. Something inside me snapped. Not the hot anger from before. This was ice-cold determination. Detectives, when do we arrest him? Mrs. Johnson, Detective Chen said. We want to make sure we have everything. Derek's planning to close on your house tomorrow, right? That's what he thinks. We'd like to let him try. We want him to show up for that closing with his forged documents and attempt to defraud the buyers and the title company. That gives us more charges and more evidence. Mr. Hutchinson leaned forward. Helen, Derek has no idea we know about the trust. He has no idea the accounts are frozen. He has no idea police have been investigating for 4 days. Tomorrow, he's going to walk into that closing thinking he's about to become rich. And instead, he's going to be arrested for multiple felonies in front of the buyers, the real estate agents, and anyone else who's there. Detective Martinez smiled. Mrs. Johnson, your son thinks he's smarter than you. Tomorrow he's going to learn that being smart and being wise are two very different things. That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in months. I called my daughter Susan in Richmond. Mom, I've been so worried. Derek said you were having some problems with memory and confusion. He said you might need to go into assisted living. Susan, honey, I need to tell you what Derek's really been doing. I spent an hour on the phone with Susan, explaining everything. The forged signatures, the stolen money, the attempted sale of my house. By the end of the call, Susan was crying. Mom, I should have known. Derek's been asking me questions about your finances for months. He said he was worried about you managing money at your age. Susan, he was planning this for a long time. Mom, what can I do? Tomorrow Derek's going to be arrested. I need you to know that I'm okay, that I'm not confused or incompetent, and that I love you. Mom, I'm driving down there tonight. You shouldn't be alone during this. Susan arrived at my house around 9 p.m., and for the first time in a week, I slept in my own bed. Susan slept in the guest room, and we talked until late about Derek, about Frank, about how family can sometimes be the most dangerous strangers you know. Mom, Susan said, I'm proud of you for fighting back. Dad would be proud too. Susan, do you think I'm doing the right thing? Having my own son arrested? Mom, Derek stopped being your son when he decided to steal from you. You're not just protecting yourself. You're protecting every other elderly person he might target if he gets away with this. The next morning, I woke up feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Not just strong, victorious. Today, Derek was going to learn what happened when you tried to steal from Helen Johnson, and I was going to be there to watch. Friday morning, the day Derek thought he was going to steal my house, I put on my best church dress and the pearl necklace Frank gave me for our 25th anniversary. If this was going to be the day my son learned the hardest lesson of his life, I was going to look like the lady who taught it to him. Susan and I arrived at the title company office at 9:45 a.m. The closing was scheduled for 10 sakane. Mr. Hutchinson was already there, along with Detective Martinez, who was dressed like a businessman and pretending to be Mr. Hutchinson's assistant. Mrs. Johnson, the title company representative said, I have to admit, I'm confused about today's closing. We've had some irregular communications about this property. Ms. Patterson, I think everything will become clear very shortly. At exactly 10 a.m., Derek's BMW pulled into the parking lot. He got out carrying a bottle of champagne and a briefcase, walking like a man who was about to become very rich. Brittany was with him, dressed like she was going to a country club luncheon instead of a real estate closing. They walked into the conference room, all smiles and confidence. Good morning, everyone, Derek said cheerfully. Beautiful day for a closing, isn't it? That's when he saw me sitting at the conference table. Mom, what are you doing here? Derek, this is my house. Where else would I be? His face went pale, but he tried to recover. Mom, we talked about this. The paperwork is all done. You just need to sign a few final documents. Derek, sit down. We need to have a conversation. Derek and Brittany took seats across from me. The Davidsons, the buyers, looked confused but hopeful. Ms. Patterson had a stack of documents ready. Derek, I said calmly, before we begin, I have a question. Do you have the deed to my house? Of course. It's right here. He pulled a document from his briefcase. Mr. Hutchinson leaned forward. Mr. Johnson, may I see that deed? Derek handed it over confidently. Mr. Hutchinson studied it for about 30 seconds before he looked up. Mr. Johnson, this deed is fraudulent. What do you mean fraudulent? I mean your mother has never owned this house. The house is owned by the Frank and Helen Johnson Family Trust. which your mother administers but cannot sell without specific legal procedures that were never followed. Derek's confidence started cracking. That's not possible. Mom owns the house. Derek, I said quietly, your father was a lot smarter than you gave him credit for. He knew this day might come. Ms. Patterson was frantically looking through her files. I'm sorry, but we can't proceed with a closing on property that isn't owned by the sellers. But we have a signed purchase agreement, Brittany said, her voice getting shrill. Mr. Hutchinson smiled. Ms. Johnson, you have a purchase agreement signed by someone who had no authority to sell the property. That's called fraud. That's when Detective Martinez stood up and showed his badge. Derek Johnson, you're under arrest for fraud, forgery, and attempted theft. The color drained from Derek's face. What? This is... Mom, what did you do? Derek, I protected myself from my own son, just like your father taught me to. As Detective Martinez handcuffed Derek, Brittany started screaming, This is insane! Helen's obviously mentally incompetent. Derek has power of attorney. Detective Chen, who had been waiting outside, came in and arrested Brittany too. Brittany Johnson, you're under arrest for fraud, conspiracy, and identity theft. The Davidsons were staring in shock. Ms. Patterson was on the phone with her lawyer. Susan was crying, but not from sadness, from relief that this nightmare was finally over. Mrs. Johnson, Mr. Davidson said, I'm so sorry, we had no idea. Mr. Davidson, Derek fooled a lot of people. You were just trying to buy a house. As Derek was being led away in handcuffs, he turned back to me. Mom, how could you do this to me? I'm your son. I stood up and looked at him, really looked at him, for what I knew would be the last time. Derek, you stopped being my son the moment you decided to steal from me. A son protects his mother. A son honors his mother. A son doesn't forge his mother's signature and try to take everything she worked 40 years to build. Mom, we were trying to help you. Derek, if you wanted to help me, you would have asked what I needed. Instead, you decided what you wanted and tried to take it. Detective Martinez paused at the door. Mrs. Johnson, we'll need you to come to the station later to finish your statement. Detective, I'll be there. After they left, the conference room was quiet except for the sound of Susan crying. Ms. Patterson was canceling the closing. The Davidsons were leaving, shaking their heads in amazement. Mr. Hutchinson put his hand on my shoulder. Helen, how do you feel? I thought about it for a moment. Mr. Hutchinson, I feel free. For the first time in years, I feel completely free. Frank would be proud of you. Frank gave me everything I needed to protect myself. All I had to do was be strong enough to use it. As Susan and I drove home to my beach house, my protected, legally secured beach house, I thought about what Derek had said. How could you do this to me? But he had it backwards. The question wasn't what I did to him. The question was what he did to himself, and the answer was simple. Derek destroyed his own life by trying to steal mine. The call from Derek's lawyer came 3 days after the arrest. Mr. Patterson was young, probably fresh out of law school, and he sounded like he was in over his head. Mrs. Johnson, I represent your son Derek. I was hoping we could work out some kind of arrangement to avoid prosecution. What kind of arrangement? Well, Derek is willing to pay back the money he borrowed from you, and he's very sorry for any misunderstanding about the house. I almost laughed. Mr. Patterson, Derek didn't borrow money from me. He stole it. There was no misunderstanding about the house. He committed fraud, multiple felonies. Mrs. Johnson, surely you don't want to see your own son go to prison. Mr. Patterson, I want to see justice done. If that means prison, then that's what Derek earned. The lawyer tried a few more approaches: family loyalty, Derek's children, the impact on everyone involved. But I'd already made my decision. Derek had made his choice when he forged my signature. Now he could live with the consequences. Over the next few weeks, I learned just how far those consequences would reach. First was Derek's job. He worked for a financial services company in Charlotte, and having an employee arrested for financial fraud was exactly the kind of publicity they couldn't afford. He was fired the day after his arrest, and because financial crimes were involved, he'd never work in banking or investment services again. Then came the house. Derek and Brittany's mortgage payment was $3,200 a month, affordable when Derek was making good money, but impossible on unemployment. They missed their first payment 2 weeks after the arrest. Brittany's reaction was predictable. She hired her own lawyer and filed for divorce within a month, claiming she'd had no idea Derek was stealing from his mother. Her lawyer argued that she was a victim too, manipulated by Derek into participating in his schemes. Detective Chen called to update me on the case. "Mrs. Johnson, Brittany's throwing Derek under the bus. She's claiming he forced her to participate, that she was afraid of him, that she thought the power of attorney documents were legitimate. Do you believe her? Mrs. Johnson, we have surveillance video of Brittany using your debit card to buy a $500 purse at Nordstrom. Nobody forced her to do that. Brittany's family turned on Derek too. Her parents, who had always looked down on Derek's working-class background, suddenly discovered they'd never trusted him. They paid for Brittany's divorce lawyer and helped her move back in with them, taking Derek's children with her. Derek tried calling me from jail while awaiting trial. I accepted the call once. 'Mom, please. I'm losing everything. My job, my house, my kids. Brittany won't even let me talk to them. Derek, you lost those things when you decided to steal from me. Mom, I wasn't trying to steal from you. I was trying to help you. Derek, helping me would have been asking what I needed. Stealing from me was taking what you wanted. Mom, can't we work something out? I'll pay you back every penny. Derek, this isn't about money anymore. It's about trust, and you destroyed that. Mom, I'm your son. No, Derek, you were my son. The man who forged my signature and tried to steal my house? I don't know who that is. The impact on Derek's children was heartbreaking. My grandchildren, ages 8 and 12, didn't understand why Daddy was in jail or why Mommy was crying all the time. Susan drove to Charlotte to visit them and came back shaken. Mom, they keep asking about you. They want to know if you're okay, if you're really sick like Daddy said. What did you tell them? I told them you're fine, that you live in a beautiful house by the ocean and that you love them very much. Did you tell them about their father? I told them that sometimes grown-ups make very bad choices and that actions have consequences. The trial was scheduled for 6 months after the arrest. Derek's new lawyer, Mr. Patterson, had quit after Derek couldn't pay him, tried to work out a plea deal. The prosecutor offered Derek 5 years in prison if he pled guilty to all charges and made full restitution. Derek refused. He wanted to go to trial, convinced he could make a jury understand that he was just trying to help his confused elderly mother. Mr. Hutchinson shook his head when he told me, "Helen, Derek still doesn't understand what he did wrong. He still thinks he was entitled to your money." The community impact was significant too. Our story made the local news, and then the regional news, and finally a national story about elder financial abuse. Derek became the poster child for children who steal from their parents. The real estate agent who had listed my house was investigated by her licensing board. Ms. Chen, who had worked with Derek, was fired for not properly verifying the ownership documents. The title company changed their procedures for elderly sellers. But perhaps the most surprising consequence was what happened to my relationship with Derek's children. Brittany, in her anger at Derek, started bringing the kids to see me. At first, I think she was trying to prove that I was competent and that Derek's claims about my mental health were lies. But the kids loved the beach house. They loved helping me in the garden. They loved hearing stories about their grandfather Frank. And slowly, I began to build the relationship with my grandchildren that Derek had kept from me for years. "Grandma Helen," my granddaughter asked one day, "why did Daddy try to take your house?" "Sweetie, sometimes people make very bad choices when they want something they can't have. Are you mad at Daddy?" "I'm sad about the choices your daddy made. But I'm not mad at you, and I love you very much." 6 months after Derek's arrest, I was sitting on my deck watching the sunset when Susan joined me with 2 cups of coffee. "Mom, any regrets?" I thought about it. Derek was awaiting trial. Brittany was rebuilding her life. The grandchildren were safe and happy. My house was secure. My money was protected. "Susan, the only regret I have is that I didn't see this coming sooner. Maybe I could have stopped Derek before he destroyed his own life." "Mom, Derek made his choices. You couldn't have stopped him." "Maybe not, but I could have protected myself sooner." As the sun set over the Atlantic, I realized something important. Derek's greed hadn't just destroyed his life. It had freed me from the burden of trying to help someone who only saw me as a resource to be exploited. For the first time in years, I was truly free to live my own life, Today marks exactly 1 year since Derek made that phone call that changed both our lives forever. I'm sitting on my deck, watching my granddaughter build sandcastles while my grandson searches for shells, and I'm thinking about how much can change in a year when you finally stop letting other people define your worth. Derek was sentenced to 4 years in prison and ordered to pay full restitution. Brittany received 3 years probation and community service. Her lawyer's argument about being manipulated by Derek worked with the jury, though Detective Chen told me privately that the evidence suggested otherwise. The restitution will take Derek 20 years to pay off, assuming he ever gets a decent job again with a felony record. But this story isn't really about Derek's punishment. It's about what I learned about myself when I was forced to fight for everything I'd worked my whole life to build. I learned that Frank was right. I am stronger than I ever gave myself credit for. I survived 40 years in a textile factory. I raised Derek by myself after his father died. I saved every penny for 20 years to buy this house. I was never weak. I just let other people convince me that being kind meant being a doormat. I learned that being 69 years old doesn't mean being helpless. In fact, being 69 means I've survived everything life has thrown at me so far, and that experience is worth more than all the money Derek tried to steal. I learned the difference between family and relatives. Derek and I share blood, but Susan and my grandchildren and I share love. Mrs. Peterson, my neighbor who offered me help when I was sleeping in my car, is more family to me than Derek ever was. Most importantly, I learned that my scars, the betrayal, the hurt, the fear of being alone, those scars became my wisdom. They taught me to value the people who choose to love me rather than the people who feel entitled to my love. The beach house is exactly as Frank and I dreamed it would be, full of laughter and love and family. Just not the family we originally imagined. Susan visits every month with her husband and kids. My grandchildren from Derek's first marriage spend summers here now, thanks to Brittany's decision to rebuild our relationship. Mrs. Peterson comes over for coffee twice a week. I've even made friends with other women my age who live along the coast. Women who have their own stories about children who disappointed them and lives they rebuilt stronger than before. Last month, I did something that would have terrified me a year ago. I started volunteering with a legal aid group that helps elderly people protect themselves from financial abuse. Turns out my story isn't unique. Children steal from their parents more often than anyone wants to admit. Mrs. Johnson, one of the lawyers told me, "You're incredibly lucky that your husband protected you so well. Most victims don't have that kind of legal shield." "I know," I said. "That's why I want to help other people build their own shields." I've helped 12 families so far. Some caught the abuse early, like I did. Others lost everything before they realized what was happening. But all of them learned the same lesson I did. You're never too old to fight back, and you're never too old to start over. Derek writes me letters from prison sometimes. They always start the same way. "Mom, I'm sorry." They always end the same way. "I hope you can forgive me." But Derek still doesn't understand what he's apologizing for. His letters talk about making a mistake, about being desperate, about trying to help me. He never acknowledges that he deliberately chose to steal from me. He never takes responsibility for the years of manipulation and lies that led up to that phone call. I don't write back. Not because I'm cruel, but because Derek needs to learn that actions have consequences and that love doesn't mean enabling someone's bad choices. Sometimes people ask me if I miss Derek. The honest answer is that I miss the son I thought I had. The boy who used to help me plant tomatoes, who called me every Sunday, who made me proud when he graduated college. But that son was partly my imagination, created by a mother's love and hope. The real Derek, the man who forged my signature and tried to steal my house. I don't miss him at all. People also ask if I ever worry about being alone. The answer is no, because I've learned the difference between being alone and being lonely. Derek made me lonely even when he was in my life, because I was constantly worried about disappointing him or not being good enough to earn his love. Now I'm alone sometimes, but I'm never lonely. I'm surrounded by people who chose to love me, and I chose to love them back. Next month, I'm doing something Frank and I always dreamed about, but never quite had the courage to try. I'm taking a cruise to Alaska with Susan and a group of women from my church. A year ago, Derek would have told me I was too old, too fragile, too confused to travel by myself. Now I know better. I'm not too old for anything except putting up with people who don't value me. As I watch the sun set over the Atlantic tonight, I think about the woman I was a year ago. Scared, confused, letting her own son treat her like an ATM with emotions. That woman had to die for this woman to be born. This woman owns her house free and clear. This woman has a bank account that no one can access without her permission. This woman has friends who respect her, and grandchildren who adore her, and a daughter who calls her a hero. This woman learned that her scars aren't signs of weakness. They're proof of survival. This woman learned that wisdom isn't something you're born with. It's something you earn through pain and growth and the courage to protect yourself when no one else will. And this woman learned the most important lesson of all. You're never too old to become who you were always meant to be. My name is Helen Johnson. I'm 69 years old. I survived my son's betrayal. I protected my home. I saved my dignity. And if an old factory worker from South Carolina can turn her scars into wisdom, so can you. Because that's what we do. We survive, we learn, we grow stronger, and we never, ever give up.